All right. You ready?
Yeah, let's talk to Ansel in Canada.
All right.
Ansel, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. What can we do for you today? What's your question?
Well, I don't know, just as a background, just to set things up for the audience.
Yeah.
All the proposals about first cause arguments, like William Craig's Kalam cosmological arguments, even Seitan Bergenkate's and Darth Dawkins' arguments about presuppositional.
Yeah.
That all comes down to what was at the beginning, right? What's the grounding?
Well, so it really depends on which argument you're talking about, because I've definitely heard variations of those arguments that don't actually go back to time, but more kind of an ongoing causal thing. So it really depends on. Are you specifically talking about the first mover argument?
Right, Aquinas,
yep.
Prime mover, all
okay.
the different contingency arguments going back and back.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Well, so anyway, that's a nitpick that if somebody wants to take the for position on, we can explore it, but go for it.
Sure. So how many times have you heard where the theists will make that argument that because you can't explain it, we must be right.
Yeah.
That God must be at the base of it, rather than turtles all the way down.
Right.
Or infinite regress to so that they'll say that there's no such thing as an infinite linear regress because you can never get to the beginning, right? And therefore you can never get to here because you don't have a beginning to get to here.
Right.
And I've listened to hundreds of these arguments where the atheist cannot come up with an answer as to why there is something rather than nothing, and therefore the theist has the upper hand because they have the argument for the explanation as to why there's something rather than nothing, and that if they can't come up with something to counter that argument, then they win, or rather, in their minds, they have. So they won't accept. They will not accept where if you don't know, you can just say you don't know.
Right.
They cannot accept that.
Right.
That's kind of why I picked up taking that kind of snarky response. Well, I did it, because it pushes them to. When I say I did it, I'm obviously being a bit of an asshole by doing that, but. What I'm doing is I'm trying to force them into giving their reasoning, right? Why is me saying I did it better than them saying God did it? And it kind of pushes the conversation forward instead of, I'm giving any answer, so any answer is better than no answer. Instead, it moves directly into justification. And that's kind of how I've done that most of the time. But it really depends, for those of you who are having conversations with people, don't use that as a catch-all way to respond, but just use it as a tool that may be beneficial. What do you think, Faye?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that the question, Ansel? I don't want to jump over what you might have actually called about.
Ansel,
there's
a pretty intense
delay.
No, there's clicking. If at all you're on speakerphone or something like that, that might be causing it. But if not, then we'll do our best.
Okay. So, that was just a setup. Now, I wanted to run by you one of my explanations as to why there's something rather than nothing.
Okay.
And why I want to see. I've never had this answer from anybody. I mean, I've listened to hundreds of these back and forth debates, and nobody's ever come up with an answer here. But so I thought I'd run it by you and See, this is a philosophical argument for why the universe or the cosmoverse has always been here, and if that's the case, then there's no need for a creator God.
Okay.
If something has always been here, then, or the cosmoverse, there's no need for a creator God. Okay?
Okay.
So here's a syllogism that I came up with here. The first premise is that the universe, this iteration of the universe, has a finite amount of particles, whether it's particles of energy or particles of matter. There's a finite amount in that it's not infinite. And I think the theists would have to agree with that, because if they think that it's infinite, there's no need for a God then. If it's infinite.
So not necessarily, but again, you have to keep in mind that this is an argument specifically for someone who's making a claim that you're against, right? So if they're making a claim that there is no infinite, then we're on the same page. But I'm sure we could find Christians or believers who believe in an infinite God or something like that. So I just want to make sure we're tailoring it to the audience and not kind of straw manning. Yeah, but let's say it's granted. So.
No, sorry, I did not say infinite God. I did not say infinite God. I said they don't accept that there's an infinite amount of material or matter or energy or particles in this universe.
Okay, let's.
That's what I meant.
Okay, let's keep going. Where from there?
Okay. Now, this number of finite amount of particles is huge. It's probably in the order of a Google amount of 10 to the 100th power amount of material or matter in the universe.
Yeah, it says there's 10 to the 80th power particles in the observable universe right here on this random website I pulled up. Okay.
So now, because there's a premise 2 is that there's a finite number of recombinations of these particles. Now, that recombination of the finite number of particles is even huger. Like, we're talking a Googleplex, which is 10 to the power of a Google. So 10 to the 100th power.
Okay.
That's a Googleplex. So that's a huge, not infinite, but it's still finite. I mean, it's huge. Okay. Premise three, specific models of the cosmoverse would account for reiterations of this universe in both the past and the future. That is, there are various cosmological models where the universe has a past iteration and we'll have a future iteration.
Ansel, you're cutting out pretty badly, and I'm kind of concerned that it's impacting the argument points that you're trying to make, because I'm only catching every third word. Can I repeat back to you what I've heard so far, and you can tell me if this is accurate?
Sure.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Premise 1 is there's a finite number of particles in the cosmoverse, which is what you call it. The second premise is that there is a finite number of combinations you can make out of those particles, and yes, it's a large number, but it is still finite.
Okay.
What is premise 3 again? Can you speed that up a little bit?
Sure. There's a before and after to this universe based upon various cosmological models, such as the Big Crunch and the re-expansion models.
Okay. And how does this all come together to counter a cosmological argument from a Christian?
Okay, the fourth premise is, if X is the number of times it takes for a reiteration of the universe to produce a exact repetition of this or any other universe, and if X is less than infinite, then this universe or any other universe has been repeated sometime in the past and will be repeated sometime in the future.
That's not going to work.
Why is that?
Because of our current models are suggesting that there's a limited amount of energy, and there's this that I have come to understand that at some point in the future that the universe is going to experience heat death. There will be no more iterations. Just because there could be iterations doesn't mean that there's the stuff to make it happen. So I wouldn't go with that one.
Yes, that is one model of the
but
cosmological.
Right.
Yeah, there's other models too.
But here's the thing. Again, it entirely depends on the theist you're talking to. I would not use this as a silver bullet argument. And the piece there is there's the modal logic thinking, which kind of brings you into possible universes and all of that good stuff. And it has been posed to me plenty of times that could be a God that is outside of the universe, which makes no sense, that would create this universe. And so I don't think that this would necessarily butt up against it, but it's an interesting thought experiment.
Right. But in their own counter-arguments to the universe being present for an infinite into the past, they say that you cannot, well, they accept that there has been some past thing that goes back for however long they accepted right. Going back.
Yeah,
they just say that
right. So people who provide that argument say that there cannot be an infinite regress, and so they that's their response. Got it. How does what you're saying right. actually respond to it? Because it sounds like an and statement and not a but statement.
Here's the response to it. Instead of a linear regress infinitely into the past, it's actually a circular regress.
Right.
So
and then I just say heat death.
Our universe is just one. No, I'm not talking about this universe. The heat death. Okay, have you ever listened to Roger Penrose?
Ansel, it's quite funny. Some people in the live chat were like, "Oh, you should read Roger Penrose." So clearly, you and some
right.
of the live chat are on the same page. I do want to cut in here with a couple of thoughts, just because we need to keep this moving along. I think that this could be useful in certain circumstances with certain theists making certain arguments. I do. I think that it might be interesting to deviate from that, oh, I don't know, therefore you don't know, therefore I win mindset, where you come with an alternate theory. But the way I'm hearing it, it just sounds like a longer version of what Eric does, which is I did it. Like, we can't pretend that we as lay people, unless you are an astrophysicist with advanced degrees, in which case that's super cool that you call in. We can't pretend to know what happened at the beginning of the universe. We can all have our theories. We can all play with math and infinite regress and circular regress and all of these things. And that's fun. And that's what theologians do all the time. That's what apologists rely on. But ultimately, I think the crux of why it's a problem to even have these arguments with theists is because of the fact that we cannot actually know any of this. And so we're all just throwing alternate theories at each other. And yeah, that can be fun and entertaining. But at the end of the day, you might be right. You might be very off. And there's no way for me to verify one way or the other if you are. So for me, the trick here is to not get pulled into their game, which is I'm going to make up a hypothesis too and put it into the form of a syllogism in order to win this debate, right? I think that as a concept is ultimately unhelpful. So if you want to use this, go ahead and use it. I do not have the requisite scientific knowledge to decide if it's accurate or not. It sounds impressive, and it might shut some people up who are, being obnoxious, and maybe it's good for that. But ultimately, my caution would be, don't get pulled into the game. It's a game, and they want you to present something so that they can, pick it apart and then still say they win. So yes, and also it's okay to just say, I don't know. And if you think that you win because of that, then you are not a good debater, and you do not know what arguments are. And goodbye.
Yeah, totally agreed there.
Sure.
It's definitely something that I've seen a lot of atheists really kind of mess up on, is this idea that, a Christian starts by saying that the universe is finite and had a beginning. And there are those atheists who will be like, no, you don't know that. And so they try and force the atheist into taking the positive position that the universe is infinite. And that's just not how that works. And so you're right. It is a game.
Yeah, and if you want to play the game, then that's fun and that's fine. But also just be aware that it is a game and that you are making a concession to them by playing it in the first place. So we do need to move on to other callers, but Ansel, thank you so much for calling in and sharing that with us. And if you refine it, or if you have a conversation with a theist and it makes them reconsider, call back in and we would love to talk with you again.
Ooh, definitely. That's actually really good. Yeah. Ansel, can you put it into an elevator pitch? See how well you can condense that argument so that you don't lose people along the way. That's a good one.
The other prong of that argument is that the short version of the version. Okay. Well, okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we need to wrap up, but
thank you.
Thank you for calling in.
Bye.
That's the tricky part about a forum like this, is a lot of the time it does require a lot of, building and constructing and deconstructing to make an argument. We understand that. We're not like being upset because it takes you a while or anything, but we also need to keep the show going. So maybe if you have a theory or a syllogism or something that requires a lot of building out, think about how you can talk about that first premise with us first, and then call in for the second premise, and then we can deconstruct each one and build it together in kind of a choppier, clippier kind of way.